Paddington in Peru, the third installment in the beloved Paddington series, continues the heartwarming and whimsical adventures of the marmalade-loving bear. Ben Whishaw once again voices Paddington with pitch-perfect sincerity and sweetness, anchoring the film with his gentle optimism. Hugh Bonneville returns as Mr. Brown with subtle wit, while Emily Mortimer steps in as Mary Brown, bringing a slightly softer edge in place of Sally Hawkins. Olivia Colman is a standout addition as the eccentric Reverend Mother, balancing camp and menace with delightful ease. Antonio Banderas as the treasure-hunting riverboat captain adds flair and unpredictability to the journey. The writing trio of Mark Burton, John Foster, and James Lamont deliver a tight, witty script that deftly weaves from family dynamics, mystery, and Peruvian folklore. The humor is light but smart, and the emotional beats resonate without veering into sentimentality. First-time feature director Dougal Wilson honors the visual charm and tone established in the previous films, while confidently guiding the story into new terrain. His background in commercial lends a creative touch to the film's vivid jungle and mountain set pieces, making the most of the Peruvian backdrop. While it stays true to the gentle, comedic tone of its predecessors, this installment introduces new themes of identity, heritage, and belonging through a South American lens. The film's plot revolves around Paddington and the Brown family traveling to Peru to visit Aunt Lucy, only to become entangled into a mystery that uncovers secrets from Lucy's past. At its heart, Paddington in Peru is a story about reconnection with family, culture, and self. The narrative expands Paddington's universe by exploring his origins more deeply, offering a richer understanding of his backstory and the values that shape him. Thematically, the film tackles ideas of family, loyalty, and cross-cultural identity, all wrapped in the soft glow of its classic humor and optimism. By setting the story in Peru, the film shifts away from the London-centric lens of the earlier entries and invites viewers to explore the broader, more diverse aspects of Paddington's heritage. This expansion adds emotional depth and global perspective to the franchise. The premise of Paddington returning to his roots in Peru immediately invokes questions of cultural identity and representation. This narrative device of having a character of Peruvian origin who has been thoroughly assimilated into British culture return to his homeland creates a perfect scenario for examining post-colonial dynamics. The review describes this as exploring broader, more diverse aspects of Paddington's heritage, but we must question how this heritage is framed and who controls its representation. The juxtaposition of lush jungle visuals with familiar cozy tones of Paddington's world suggests the potential exoticization of Peru. This framing risks reinforcing a colonial gaze, where the South American landscape becomes primarily a picturesque backdrop for a narrative still fundamentally centered on British sensibilities. Paddington's unwavering beliefs in kindness, fairness, and good manners are universal virtues. Yet these qualities are specifically coded as British throughout the franchise. When these values travel to Peru, we must consider whether the film represents them as superior to or in conversation with local values and traditions. The colonial undertone becomes particularly relevant when a character embodying British manners and morality returns to a former colonized region. The description of signature British charm in a Peruvian setting further underscores this tension. Does the film acknowledge the historical relationship between Britain and South America? Or does it represent a sanitized version of cultural exchange that elides these power dynamics? It's notable that the creative team behind the film, Mark Burton, John Foster and James Lamont, are all British writers. While their talents are indisputable, this raises questions about who has the authority to tell stories about Peru and Peruvian identity. However, a good writer is a good writer, but there still has to be some form of cultural consultation in crafting this representation of Peru, which could indicate a continuation of colonial patterns where Western creators are allowed to speak for and represent non-Western cultures. The reviews praises the film for showing how kindness, compassion and curiosity can bridge any cultural divide, but such framing potentially minimizes the structural inequalities and historical injustices that created these divides in the first place. Paddington's journey back to Peru unwittingly echoes the complex entanglements between Britain and South America, shaped by centuries of imperialism, resource extraction, and cultural exchange. Historically, the cultivation and trade of oranges, like many agricultural commodities, were deeply implicated in colonial economies. Oranges, native originally to parts of Asia, were transported across the continents through imperial networks. In South America, European colonizers introduced citrus fruits during the 16th century, embedding them into local agriculture. Yet the trade of such goods often came at the cost of indigenous autonomy, land, and labor, laying bare a pattern of resource extraction that benefited European markets while marginalizing native populations. In Paddington in Peru, the titular bear's return is portrayed with nostalgia and affection. However, if we read the story through a post-colonial lens, Paddington himself, her polite, marmalade-loving figure, can be seen as a symbol of colonial hybridity. His beloved marmalade sandwiches are particularly symbolic. Marmalade, a British culinary staple made from imported citrus fruits like oranges, encapsulates the hidden colonial dependencies underlying everyday British life. Paddington's marmalade obsession subtly underscores the legacy of imperial consumption patterns that continue to define global economic relations. The framing of Peru in the film, exotic, picturesque, and mystical, mirrors the way colonial powers historically represented colonized lands, as spaces of adventure and wonder, ripe for exploration, extraction, and ultimately nostalgic idealization. In this context, Paddington's journey is not just a homecoming. It is a re-engagement with a space shaped by colonial narratives of loss, longing, and displacement. Therefore, while Paddington in Peru is ostensibly a children's adventure, it inadvertently invites reflection on deeper historical structures, how colonialism's ghost haunts even the sweetest, most innocent of tales, and how commodities like the humble orange quietly narrate histories of empire, trade, and transformation. Paddington in Peru is a charming continuation of a franchise that has become a cultural touchstone for wholesome, smart family entertainment. It strikes a balance between emotional depth and comedic levity. It underscores Paddington's enduring message that kindness, compassion, and curiosity might be able to bridge any cultural division.
Please subscribe to VAST, a portal of immersive learning and sharing. Also subscribe for information on our upcoming events.